Russia's incredibly weak. Everyone saw them as the number two superpower in the world. They've got an economy the size of Italy, and their military has been so useless they can't even beat Ukraine.
Welcome, everyone, to the Mars Report. It is Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. Today, we are speaking with Rob Herzog. Rob is a fifth generation Afrikaner and part of a multi generational South African industrial family. He is one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Africa and has worked with Goldman Sachs in New York and was Rupert Murdoch's chief of staff for News Corp. Rob also has a Harvard MBA when Harvard was a real institution of higher learning. Rob understands international business, geopolitics, and he understands communications. Also joining us today will be Fred Hees, Sonny Reynolds, and Andrew Butte. Fred is a native South African and a South African military veteran. He is an international businessman and an international military expert. He also is the founder of Rhino 911, an organization protecting endangered rhinos in Africa. Sonny is an American military officer and a medical expert. Andrew is a retired military officer, U.S. military, and an investment banker. All three have firsthand knowledge, firsthand expertise in geopolitics and the machinations of international world governments and terrorist organizations. Why should anyone in the U.S. care about South Africa?
Well, I hope they do, and I'll tell you why they should. I don't
I
think
hope
so.
they do
Yeah,
too. Tell
yeah,
us why.
I don't think South Africa's been on anyone's radar for so long. And in 1994, when white minority rule handed over to democracy in South Africa, Nelson Mandela stepped in, the great saint. And for the next 14 years, South Africa did very well. Everybody said, we've done it, we've succeeded, we've solved South Africa, and then turned around and looked for the next country or problem to solve and
So
forgot all
Nelson
about South
Mandela
Africa.
did a good job, is what you're saying.
He did a good job. Bottom line, he did a good job. I mean, I can go into a lot of detail on that comment, but he stood astride the country and he managed the country in a way that we had economic growth, we had meritocracy, everything was going well. There was a lot of flaws in his policies. The ANC had a lot of malevolence and incompetence built into it, which was then permeating into the country. But let's give them the credit of 14 years of stability and growth. But from 2008 onwards, everything has fallen apart. But your question was, why should anyone in the US care about what happens in South Africa? Well, South Africa is, people always say their three biggest economies are Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa. But South Africa is the biggest economy. It's the most
In
formal,
Africa.
industrialized Western economy. It's the most democratic of those big three countries, still so, even despite what the ANC has done. And it has a very strong Judeo-Christian, generally pro-West leaning. It's also the springboard into Africa. There's more rail network in South Africa than the rest of Africa put together, despite it being destroyed by the ANC over the last 15 years. And the infrastructure that was put in place, mostly prior to 1994, was superb. The Electricity Supply Commission, the sewage, the roads, the ports were in very, very good shape in 1994 when the ANC took over. They're a disaster now, but they can be fixed, but not under the ANC government. This South Africa is also, I think, the United States' largest trading partner in Africa, and there are over 600 US companies in South Africa at the moment. We hold critical mineral reserves, and these many of these mineral reserves, not just the basics, iron ore, coal, cobalt, nickel, but they're the rare earths and other things that are essential for technology defense and green energy transitions. And beyond economics, South Africa is the regional hub into Africa. A lot of these American companies that are in South Africa have it as a base to expand into South Africa. So South Africa also has, falling apart, democratic institutions. So plus strategically, if you look at China's Belt and Road strategy, a crucial part of it, if the Red Sea is blocked, if the Houthis continue their troubles, if Yemen remains an issue, and if China still has influence over Panama, Cape Town and Simonstown Naval Base is going to become increasingly strategic. And on that note, I think I've given enough reason for America to care about what goes on in South Africa.
I think we should care about what goes on in South Africa. And South Africa, as I understand it, is minerally very wealthy and could be a driving force to help improve the entire continent if it's allowed to develop. You made comments at some point that you thought that South Africa is either a failed state or approaching being a failed state. Can you explain what you mean?
So there's a formal definition of a failed state, which goes something like this: a country or a state that's lost its ability to fulfill certain basic functions around security and development, which lacks effective control over its territory and borders. You'll know about that in America. And the common characteristics involve things like the inability to have tax collection, law enforcement, security assurance, territorial control, infrastructure maintenance. And then when this happens, there's widespread corruption and criminality that takes place, and
One
an
second.
intervention of non-state actors. The definition is something like that. South Africa has all of
One
those.
second. Are you describing South Africa or
No,
Southern California?
Yeah, Gavin Newsom. He's
Well,
basically he's the ANC of America. Gavin
He's the
Newsom. He's the
Jacob
ANC.
Zuma of America, actually.
He is the Jacob Zuma. What a slick, nasty human being. I mean, I just feel ill when I look at him. But let's stick to South Africa.
Yes,
Yeah.
All of these issues.
My point was this, that there's a lot that we need to watch in South Africa to learn. That's the point.
Very much so. And Donald Trump has actually identified a lot of those things, arrested and stopped many of them, and in the process of stopping the rest of them. So chapeau to Donald Trump. But South Africa, if you take all of those elements, South Africa is a failed state from every single one of those aspects, or a failing state is probably more correct, other than tax collection. The one area with the ANC government, sorry, two areas, is Treasury. They've kept it independent and haven't got a lot of US dollar debt, which to their credit is one of the few things they've done right. But also tax collection, they've been super efficient because that's where the money comes in and that's where they can steal. So they've been very good at that, ensuring tax rands come in so they can steal the money.
Failing state, we say, right?
It's a failing state.
And this is a harder question to answer because, in the sun also rises. There's this very conversation between the characters. Is how do you go bankrupt? So first gradually and then suddenly, right? And so the question related to that is, what's the risk that in the next few years they actually go over the edge into collapse? I.e., go from a failing state to a Zimbabwe-like mess.
So I think maybe the better analogy is a Argentina or worse, a Venezuela type mess. I think Zimbabwe happened very quickly. The white farmers were chased off their land. There was land invasions. The economy collapsed, and that was it. I think it's less likely that happens, and more likely we're already becoming an Argentina pre-Malay, where there's complete economic stagnation. Our country is growing at 0.6% economic growth. A mere 6 weeks ago, our finance minister announced his budget, which got rejected, which had 1.8% economic growth. 6 weeks later, we're tracking at 0.6 economic growth, and our population growth is 2%. Just think about that dynamic. It has been much like that for the last 10 years.
Trace out the decline in per capita income that suggests.
We're getting poorer by the day.
Decline in per capita income, right? So
the other horrific statistic is that we have 33% official unemployment rate, official, and our youth unemployment rate is at 60%. So social pressures are mounting dangerously. And we have an infrastructure crisis. So we have economic stagnation and we have an infrastructure crisis. We have fixed investment of 15% of GDP, whereas an emerging market economy should be at 25%.
At least, yeah.
At least. So the ANC has de-industrialized this country. Our ports are ranked at the worst in the world. South African Airways is effectively gone. It's gone from hundreds of aircraft to 20 or 30. It was used as an employment agency by the ANC. It's collapsed. Our Electricity Supply Commission has been such a failure that for the last few years, we've had something called load shedding. Paul, you'll know what this is. But load shedding is 2, 3, 4, 6 hours a day of no electricity, none whatsoever for the country. How do you run an economy like that? So these are the infrastructure and economic angles. I haven't even got onto the kleptocracy, the thieving, the racism, the Soviet playbook being played out. I mean, and the overregulation.
Have key sectors of the economy taken their own action here and gone off the grid?
Yes.
Their own generators, et cetera, and so forth.
Yes, great question. So there's privatization, what I call by default.
Yes.
And if you take electricity, your example, and the airlines, on the electricity side, Eskom, the Electricity Supply Commission, controlled production, generation, transmission, all three elements, and has failed because the ANC government has used it to loot and steal. The problem with state-owned enterprises, if you've got evil in government, is it's the easiest trough to steal from. Put your people in place, steal the maintenance budget, divert monies, and they've done that par excellence.
That's why resource-rich countries are among the poorest populations in the world.
The resource curse. Exactly right.
Yeah.
You're too lazy to rely on human capital.
Right.
But electricity has been a major disaster for this country. But the private sector, small, medium-sized enterprises, big corporates have had to go and find alternative energy sources and have gone into solar and wind, which are not ideal because we know actually it ends up being quite expensive electricity because, you only get solar power when the sun shines, you only get wind power when the wind blows. You've got to have baseload energy. But it's every middle class or wealthy South African has water from a borehole, electricity from a generator or solar and wind, private schools, private security. I mean, what do we need a government for? They're not delivering us any services other than taking our taxes. On the aviation sector, which is the other example, South African Airways was broken to death by the ANC, was stolen and broken to death and used as an employment agency and effectively went bust. And what happened was the private airline carriers stepped into the breach. So we have FlySafair, Airlink, and Semair, and people are flying happily within South Africa on those private airlines. So there's privatization by default. It's not a policy. But that saved us.
And it's very interesting.
Yeah, very good airlines.
Rob, with the airlines being privatized, are they flying safely vis-a-vis how good is the aircraft controlling?
Excellent. Well, sorry, that's a good question. So I didn't answer that right. The airlines, the privately owned airlines, are superb, well-maintained, well-piloted, well-crewed, well-run. The aviation sector is creaking at the edges. So the airports desperately need maintenance. The radar systems are out of date. The people handling the aviation sector are generally incompetent and were put in place because they were ANC loyalists, not because they were skilled. So there's a lot of danger around the aviation sector, but the three private airlines flying are doing a very good job.
Do they use their own aircraft?
Yes, they do. Yeah. Well, the airports are run by the government. The airlines are run privately. So, I think there are going to be issues ahead of us. Good question.
It's interesting when you're talking about this, we have to go back to California, which hasn't had load shedding, sort of, but they have had rolling brownouts. And then, of course, the issues that we have had with DEI being basically used in the FAA's aircraft controllers. It's just insane.
Well, Gary,
Uh,
we are DEI as a country. Donald Trump said South Africa is DEI as a country. So you can only imagine the incompetence that has come into important positions only because of pigmentation.
is today's South Africa a racist country?
Everything is racially classified. In our constitution in 1994, it was non-racial. And the word black is not used in our constitution except for once when it defines the color in our colors of our flag. So it was meant to be a non-racial country, a non-racial constitution. And you know what's happened? We have 140 race-based laws in our country, and 114 of them were added since 1994. And most of them are anti-white and racist laws. So is South Africa a racist country? Yes, it is. It's actually more racist than under apartheid.
Really?
Really.
It's
So what's been going on since 94, especially since 98, is all about retribution rather than reconciliation, which was what the leading edge of Mandela's initiative was, reconciliation. And as I
They
understand it,
they brand it as transformation. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So
But
what
what
the
is it
ANC has done,
retribution?
what the ANC has done since 2008 to 2024, they had more than 50% of the vote since 1994 to 2024, 30 years, majority rule by the ANC. But from 2008 to 2024, they've had an unbridled, unlimited ability to break, steal, and introduce something called Black economic empowerment, which has been accelerated in the last few years. It's now called broad-based Black economic empowerment, BBBEE, which is incredibly racist, disguised as transformation, disguised as empowering previously disadvantaged. And all it's done is transfer, I think it's a huge amount of money, trillions of rands to basically 100 families that are loyal to the ANC. Patrice Motsepe, Cyril Ramaphosa, the Radebis, and the Mantashes, 100 gangster families have basically eaten at the trough and taken from South Africa for themselves in the most horrific way. And only now, in the last few months, our spineless president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who has been, remember, the deputy president under Jacob Zuma and now president in 2017, all of a sudden says, we have to have economic growth with transformation, otherwise you are against our country. Transformation? They've had 30 years to do it, and all they've done is steal 100 families. It's disgusting.
have these families come under U.S. sanctions yet?
No, but please, come on. There's Ronnie Jackson, the congressman's bill that has been reviewed and then been put to Congress, and names will be named in that bill.
Okay. Um, are there well, we've heard stories about white farmers being targeted and killed. Uh, A, how bad a problem is this, and is the government approving it?
So in 1994, and I'm going to get this number slightly wrong, there were 80,000 commercial farmers in South Africa. The
White
majority of
farm.
them were, well, no, not just white, black, Indian colored, but the majority of the best run land and larger farms, more commercialized, industrialized farms, were white owned. But a process of transformation did take place. There are now only 30,000. It's less than half, 30,000 commercial farmers. In America,
Okay.
there are 3 million. I'm just giving you
Yeah.
30,000 commercial farmers left in South Africa, not only white, 3 million American commercial farmers. There are 2 farm attacks every day in South Africa. Every single day, 2 farm attacks. There are 2 farm murders or murder of farmers every week in South Africa. And 20% of the murders involve rape and torture. It's not just white farmers, but predominantly. And if you take the ratio since 2000 to 2024 of the number of South African farmers murdered, and you extrapolate that to the 3 million American commercial farmers, you would have had 250,000, thereabouts, American farmers murdered between 2000 and 2024. Think about that number. And for anyone to say South Africa is a violent society, yes, farm murders happen, but there are murders all over South Africa, not true. You are 3 times more likely to be murdered as a farmer in South Africa than as a policeman, and twice as likely to be murdered as a policeman than an average citizen. Being a South African farmer is the most dangerous profession in South Africa and maybe the world. Is the government sanctioning it, you asked? Not explicitly, but when Julius Malema and his lunatic EFF Red Berets, think of the brown shirts in Germany, jump up and down, 100,000 in the stadium, kill the Boer, kill the farmer, one settler, one bullet, we'll slit the throat of whiteness, but not yet. Our ANC government, who've captured our judiciary, then come out to say it's not hate speech, it's a liberation song. But the murders, the attacks on farms and the murders spike every time after those awful, awful performances by the EFF. So the second thing is, has the government done anything to protect farmers? No, absolutely nothing. The police and army, who are weak and pathetic because they've been corrupted to death, have done almost nothing. They've looked the other way. Farmers have had to protect themselves.
Is South Africa's real problem too much debt and a legacy of colonialism, or is it an inept and tremendously corrupt government on a massive scale?
100% the latter. We have a debt problem. We've hit the barriers we've passed the barriers of the World Bank, debt ceiling, but we don't have a lot of dollar debt. And that's why we kind of are surviving. The legacy of colonialism is complete nonsense. Apartheid, whiteness, and colonialism. Surely there's an expiration date by which you stop blaming your ex-husband or ex-wife. And there has to be an expiration date by which you cannot keep blaming apartheid or colonialism. And they've had 30 years in power, 30 years. And now, all of a sudden, what's the problem? Oh, it's white people, it's colonialism, it's nonsense. The ANC is to blame. So it's entirely a corrupt government, a mafia government, and it's on a massive scale. It's top down. And they have a policy which they instituted in about 2005, where Cyril Ramaphosa, our current president, was on that committee, called CADRE, cadre deployment. It's a Soviet playbook. In South Africa, they say cadre, but it's cadre deployment, in which all the positions of power, the heights of the economy, the heights of politics, but also down to the sort of municipal level, town, village, any position that controlled decision-making or a budget, the people that got up in the morning and did the work were replaced with ANC loyalists, most of whom were completely incompetent and unable to do the job they were given, other than steal. And so, we're deindustrializing, we're going backwards, we're getting poorer, we're falling apart, purely as a result of corruption and the Soviet playbook, which is the malevolence of the ANC.
So basically, what I hear you saying is, rather than the ANC being a political party intended to right previous wrongs, what it is, it's basically corrupt and using the tool of racism as a tool to enrich themselves personally.
Correct. They're called transformation, DEI, Black economic empowerment. It is just theft, simply theft.
The comparisons between what you're describing and things that are happening in the United States are staggering. When you have, Harry Truman put it very succinctly, uh, any politician that leaves office with more money than he had coming in is a crook. And we have a lot of those. And a lot of them are in the black community. I mean, Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi. I mean, these people they're crazy.
I mean, our ANC are your Democrats. They're corrupt top to bottom line.
Gary,
Yes.
I wanted to just comment on one thing here. I think both you and Rob hit the nail right on the head. If you take a direct line, starting with the Clintons, going through USAID policies that were instituted across Africa, and people start auditing the trail of the money now, it is disgusting. It is mind-boggling and eye-popping, the best words to use, to see how many billions have been pilfered from here, ended up in pockets on that side of the world, finding its way to pockets on this side of the world. And when people start getting arrested on this side, and you start tracing through the SWIFT system where the monies went, you're going to find all of a sudden a lot of the same people, members of the same club.
For those who don't know, Fred is a longtime friend of our group. He is himself from South Africa, and he's an international businessman, and he's based right now in Reno, Nevada. So and he does a lot of business in the United States. So he too has an unusual international geopolitical perspective, and he has seen what has occurred not only in South Africa, but some of the other states, such as Zimbabwe, which was a totally failed state. And when they took over Rhodesia, they took a very successful breadbasket and turned it into a garbage pit in 3-4 years?
Almost overnight. Almost overnight. Zimbabwe just collapsed, went straight into the abyss, much like Venezuela. But Venezuela was a bit of an economic titan, and it still had their oil revenues to perpetuate the corruption. I often say to people, if the ANC had a brain trust, and they don't have any brain, and they certainly don't have any trust anymore, they would have kept the economy ticking along at a certain level so they could steal for longer. But these gangsters get greedy, and then I think they're beginning to think they've run out of time to steal, and they're trying to accelerate the racist and socialist laws, even though they are no longer over 50%. And maybe I should just tell the viewers a little bit about where we are politically today.
One second. Every time, the reason I laughed, because this is not a funny thing, this is really gallows humor. Whenever you say ANC, I think of the Democrat Party in the United States. But go ahead. You were saying about...
Well, okay, I'll give you a quick potted history of democracy. 1994, the ANC got a massive majority of the country. Between 1994 and 2024, they started losing votes and their popularity declined. And the main opposition, the party that you and I would support, the Democratic Alliance, which is, center, slightly center left, but free market.
Is the Democratic Alliance in South Africa primarily white, or is it mixed race?
Well, it started off primarily white, but it's now very much mixed race. So in 2024, the ANC lost its majority. It went from 56% to 41%. A massive, massive loss. And the Democratic Alliance is at about 22%, and they're the next biggest. But to get 22% of the vote, we've got 60 million people. I think are voting, like 22, 23 million is our voting population. To get 22%, the Democratic Alliance has got a lot of black, white, colored, and Indian voters. It's not just white by any means. By the way, colored in South Africa means a very different thing to Americans. In South Africa, it's people of mixed race. Okay, so it's black and white together, or Indian and white together, or whatever.
By the way, in addition to the white population that's been victimized or penalized, what about the Indian population?
Very good point. So I often talk about anti-white racist laws, but black economic empowerment used to mean previously disadvantaged. It meant black, colored, Indian, and others, non-white. Today, black economic empowerment only means the ANC elite and friends. So all the colored people, all the Indian people, and a lot of the other black tribes who are not ANC loyalists are excluded from these economic opportunities to steal and loot. So where are we going? We have an election in 2029, national election. Our economy is not going to make it to there. We have municipal elections at the end of 2026, where the ANC is going to get shredded at the town, village, and provincial level. And we have a glimmer of hope in 2029 that we'll have a centrist, Judeo-Christian, pro-West, pro-free market government in place. But the economy, I don't think, is going to make it.
Do you have confidence that the integrity of the South African election system will allow that to happen?
Weirdly, yes.
Okay.
I think the one thing we do have is free speech, because the way I speak publicly, I wouldn't survive in Russia, China, Iran, and other monster countries like that. I'd have disappeared.
You could also have been prior to the Trump administration, you would have been canceled here.
I would have been cancelled on YouTube.
And in the UK, you'd be arrested.
But South Africa weirdly has free speech. So chapeau to South Africa. And I think our democracy does work. I think, the ANC in 2024 lost its majority the first time in 30 years. People said, what if they don't accept it? What if we had civil unrest? Well, they accepted it and formed a coalition with the Democratic Alliance and a whole lot of other smaller parties. The coalition is called the GNU, the Government of National Unity. Okay, the GNU.
Yes.
And it's been around for 1 year now. And has achieved.
The agriculture minister from the Democratic Alliance was in the meeting with Trump recently, right?
I know. And Cyril Ramaphosa goes, my white agricultural minister. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, right.
Why don't you just say your agricultural minister? But so the GNU has been in power for a year.
Rob, you went back, said something which I think is very important, and I want you to elaborate on it. You said you have faith that the election system is honest. Can you tell us, first off, how long is the voting period? Do they vote one day?
They vote, it's 24 hours. It's a voting day. Yeah, it's a voting day. It's a public holiday, a Wednesday or a Sunday or something like that. Everyone lines up, votes. And yeah.
Do you have mail-in ballots?
I think the internationals have to go to, we don't. The internationals have to go to the embassies. No, we don't have the problem you guys have.
And what about the voting? Do they vote with paper ballots?
It's a paper ballot, and you get a mark on your finger, like an indelible ink.
Just like they did in Iraq.
Do you have an ID requirement for voting? You need to show an ID?
Yes. Yes, you do. You need to have registered beforehand. So you need to have gone through a registration process in advance. I think it's even a month or more in advance. Otherwise, you aren't eligible to vote. And you bring your ID and you vote provincial and national. You get, I think, 2 votes. You vote for who's running your province.
In a country that is borderline failing, supposed to be not very democratic, has theoretically not as well educated as the United States, and generally might even be considered third world to some degree. You have paper ballots, 1 day voting, no mail-in ballots to speak of, and you have proof that that when a citizen votes, he can only vote once because he dips his finger in some ink or something along those lines.
There's some irregularities at the sort of places that nobody can get to, in the middle of the bush, in the middle of the forests, in the middle of, it's these settlements in the middle of nowhere. There are definitely irregularities. But in the main, our IEC, our Electoral Commission, is neutral, watchful, transparent, and I don't think it can be influenced by the ruling party, the ANC. I'm sure there are irregularities, but nothing like America.
Well, the thing that I have a great hope for the United States is that there is a movement, the Election Integrity Network, which is headed by Cleta Mitchell, who's one of our friends. and it is actually fixing the election system slowly but surely. And there's a lot of resistance because without elections, you don't have anything. Without borders, you don't have a country. And I took you off what you were saying, and I apologize, but I thought that this was way important. You guys are
So
doing
we
it right.
have the government of national unity. They've been in power for a year. Their main role seems to be not economic growth, not fixing service delivery, not fixing the country, not fixing our international relationships, but purely keeping out the next two biggest parties, Jacob Zuma, ex-president's MK party, which is a bunch of terrorists and criminals, and Julius Malema, EFF, those of the Red Beret and Kill the Boer, who together have 20 something percent and could easily have done a coalition with the ANC. But the ANC fear those parties and fortunately decided to go into coalition with the Democratic Alliance. So we have hanging in the wings two very scary, dangerous parties that together have 20, 22% of the vote in South Africa. Very hardcore left, sort of fascist on the one hand, communist on the other.
Yeah. Well, related to that, there was legislation passed concerning the expropriation, allowing for the expropriation of farmland. What was the nature of the coalition that got that passed?
So expropriation without compensation.
Right.
Can you think of a worse name for a bill? If you're going to steal, call it something
That
else.
was the name of the bill.
That's the name of the bill.
Yeah.
EWC.
The
Why
best
would
thing about
anyone?
it is the best thing about the bill was that its name was very clear.
Well, it's
Very
transparent,
clear.
that's for sure.
Usually leftists create a sort of equity, inclusion, empowerment name,
transformation.
which
Right.
really means theft and stealing
Right.
and lack of meritocracy. This says what it is. But Paul, it's not just farmland. Expropriation without compensation is homes, farms, land, banks, the watch
So
off your
what
arm.
political parties allied with the ANC to get this done?
None. The ANC had a majority when they put this to Parliament.
Oh, so
got it
this was
voted
done
through,
before the elections in 24. Got it. Okay.
and it was irreversible. And then,
Yeah, okay. No, fine.
our spineless, useless
Cannot-
Cyril Ramaphosa signed it into law.
Yeah, okay.
So now, since the ANC no longer has a majority, this is not reversible.
It is, but you've got to have Cyril Ramaphosa, the ANC, who are the 40% of the coalition, put their hands up and say, EWC doesn't work, scaring away foreign investment. Black economic empowerment has failed. BE has failed and is destroying our country. And we should repeal both of those. But the ANC needs to stand up and do it. And there's no incentive for them to do that.
It's interesting. What do you think when Ramaphosa was in the White House with Trump? What was your take on that meeting?
I thought Trump was very smart. He didn't insult Ramaphosa directly. He pointed to the economic freedom fighters, 10% of South Africa's voting population, and said, how can this guy stand up and say, kill the whites, kill the Boer, kill the farmers, and you don't do anything about it? It was very pertinent that he didn't pick on the ANC, didn't pick on Cyril, but he pointed out an absolutely horrific thing going on in South Africa, which Cyril Ramaphosa has kind of looked the other way and allowed to happen. It was a very clever thing to do. And it was interesting, J.D. Vance didn't say anything, Elon Musk didn't say anything, had the laser stare going on. And Cyril, being under huge pressure, Cyril Ramaphosa, brings his white agricultural minister, two famous golfers, both white, and a white billionaire. He gets the whites to come in and sort of ride to his rescue when he's under pressure. Think about that as a weird dynamic. And what were they doing there? Were they defending the ANC? Felt like it. I didn't like that.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually. What was Bernie Yells and Retief Goosen doing there?
I think Donald Trump invited them. In a weird way, I think he encouraged them to be there. And Retief Goosen told the truth. He said, I've got family members in South Africa on farms that have been attacked. And Ernie Els said a very clever thing. He said, you can't right a wrong by doing another wrong. So they made their points there. But I thought it was an absolute farce. I thought America did the right thing, behaved properly, was smart and poignant, and the South African delegation were a joke. I mean, funnily enough, the agricultural minister, John Steenhuisen, I thought was quite presidential. He was the one guy that came out of it actually rather well.
I thought he was kind of impressive, actually.
Yeah.
Is it possible for a white to be elected president in South Africa?
The answer is yes, weirdly. This Dr. Frans Cronje, who does the best polls in South Africa, did a deep poll, and he goes into the rural areas, the urban areas, poorer areas, and it seems the majority of South Africans actually don't care about race, don't care about pigmentation, and don't care who the president is, as long as the economy is growing and they have a chance of getting jobs, which isn't the case at the moment. But don't look at me. Don't ask me if I'm standing up. I'm not.
Can you describe the relationship that South Africa has with other countries in Africa? Because it seems like it should be and could be a strong leader.
It should and could be, and it was. I think in the old days, under the apartheid regime, South Africa was so economically and militarily powerful that it just dominated the area. But it was a lot of quid pro quo. So, South Africa sold electricity to half of Africa, goods and services were traded, and there was a very commercial relationship. Under the ANC, our borders have collapsed. And of our 60 million population, we've probably got 8 to 10 million illegal immigrants in our country. 8 to 10 million, way more than America. And our borders are porous, our military's collapsed, our police are useless. And there are tons of immigrants from as far and as scary places as Somalia, just doing business and living off the public services, which have collapsed. So South Africa's relationship with the rest of Africa is still very commercial, very economically driven. But I think these countries are looking at South Africa and going, things are going badly wrong down there. Zambia is improving under President Hichilema. Malawi is improving. Kenya is improving. Ghana is improving. A lot of these countries, Rwanda is in very good shape. A lot of these countries are actually creating economic growth, opportunity, whether they're democracies or not. South Africa is going backwards, and the rest of Africa can see it.
So what's the implication if the rest of Africa sees it going backward?
I think a South African economic collapse will be a disaster for sub-Saharan Africa. A disaster. It's too interlinked. It is very worrying.
What would it take to reverse all this? And is there anything the United States could do?
Great question. South Africa, the democracy seems to be working. The ANC is collapsing. Democratic Alliance, the good guys are getting stronger, but it's going to just move too slowly, take too long. We need external pressure or some external crisis. And in my view, that external pressure, opportunity crisis, is Donald Trump, is America. America has never had a real foreign policy for Africa. They've used proxies and they've not really taken Africa as seriously as America should, particularly South Africa. And under the Democrats, they don't want to say boo to a black African president. So they've kind of allowed anyone to do what they want, allowed Russia and China to move in. But Donald Trump's not taking that nonsense, nor does J.D. Vance, nor is, excellent Marco Rubio. Wow, what a top man. And America needs a proper foreign policy, needs to keep South Africa as a priority, and I thank you for that, and put absolute pressure on the ANC government, all the hate speech people, all the corrupt people, and I'm hoping Ronnie Jackson's bill goes through and America puts huge pressure on individuals. Magnitsky list, SDN, targeted sanctions on the bad guys. We need that pressure.
It's interesting that one of the key things that you have is a really solid voting system that works.
You're a bit surprised, Gary.
Stunned. But it's the way it should be. It's the way we once had it. But that's the core of everything. how would you, from a perspective of being from another country, how would you gauge the quality of our president and his cabinet?
World class. World class. I mean, you really have arrested the major problems in America at the 1 minute to midnight. 1 minute to midnight. I mean, if I look at the 100 days of Donald Trump and
It
his
was
incredible
outstanding.
cabinet, he said prior to being elected, I'm going to close the border. I'm going to get rid of illegal immigrants. He's closed the border. The border crossings are down 90%. He's rounding up illegal immigrants, despite Gavin Newsom defending them, and doing his best to get the 10, 12 million out. I mean, that's going to be a huge effort. It's harder than you think. You know that. He has drill, baby, drill. America is energy independent, exporting LNG to Europe. Unbelievable. And your strategic oil reserves gone up. It's gone up. You couldn't
Yes.
be in better shape on drill, baby, drill. DEI
Biden took it
is
down by 50%,
it's
took it
up.
down to 50% of capacity.
It's way up now. And you've got DEI on its back foot and woke on its back foot. And he's also, amazingly, in his 100 days, focused on incredible international, including South Africa, international affairs, sorting things out. In 100 days, he's done more than any other president in America. So what can I say? And he's forcing Europe to pay for their own defense at last. What can I say but well done? We need another 100 days like that.
Is so, in your view, is the Trump administration respected internationally?
More than you think. More than you think.
Please explain what you mean by that.
So obviously Europe, low growth, socialist, overregulated, lazy, has been ripping off America. America said, no more, sort yourselves out, defense. Italy, Spain, Portugal, other laggards have been 1% of their GNP has been spent on defense. It's supposed to be 2%. Now everyone's going to have to get to 3%. But countries like Poland, Sweden, Hungary, there are a lot of countries in Europe that have huge respect for America and are thrilled Donald Trump's in power. South Korea, Japan, India. Look at India, how respectful they are. Saudi Arabia, many countries in the Middle East. They actually are welcoming Donald Trump, welcoming his directness, his transactional nature. And I would think, Argentina, I would think a majority of the countries in the world are delighted to have someone like Donald Trump, a man of principle, a man who says what he's going to do and does it, in charge of America.
It's interesting. You just described Donald Trump as a man of principle. There are a lot of people in the United States that say he's not a man of principle. Why do you say he is?
Because what did he say before getting elected, to get elected? He's fulfilled every single promise. Who else has done that? Everyone finds reasons not to. He's found reasons to fulfill what he's promised.
I happen to agree with you. I think that Donald Trump he's incredible. I think he's grotesquely underestimated. And when people think that he is not bright, doesn't plan ahead, has a thin skin, shoots from the hip, and has no patience, if that's your view of him, then you don't know what's coming. If you think the exact opposite, it isn't hard. Do you think he can bring peace to Russia and Ukraine and possibly the Middle East?
Russia's incredibly weak. Everyone saw them as the number 2 superpower in the world. They've got an economy the size of Italy. And their military has been so useless, they can't even beat Ukraine. So Russia's on its knees. They're using ancient equipment. All they have is manpower into the meat grinder. And Ukraine will hold it off. Ukraine, a tiny country, is holding off Russia. Russia is over. Weak, pathetic. I wouldn't worry about that.
Russia's committing genocide on its own population.
I think you guys touched on one thing, which is very critical. Yes, China's on its back heel. Russia's weak. But the global theater, the way we look at it, there's basically 3 touch points. There's the Panama Canal, there's the Suez Canal, and there's the Cape of Good Hope. Those are the major maritime
choke points,
waterways. The first 2, the Panama Canal and the Suez Canal, can be blown to hell Very quick. The Cape of Good Hope cannot. For long-term maritime security, if somebody was serious about foreign policy in the administration and view that with a very similar view than what you would look at where the strategic bombers are out in the Indian Ocean.
Chagos Islands.
And if somebody will then look at South Africa, and if they can't look at South Africa, but look at even at just the Western Cape as a safe haven for long-term strategic interest for the US Navy and for US foreign policy, you will have something that's real, that's valuable. All of a sudden, number 3 becomes number 1 in terms of level of importance, and that will stabilize not only sub-Sahara South Africa, you'll have a platform for where you can tackle the real problems of the Sahel.
In my dreams, I see the USS Nimitz parked off the Cape.
That just rounds out the answer to our first question, right? Why should we care? Well, there you go, right?
There we go.
Iran was previously had no money. So where did they get the money that they sent to South Africa?
It's small money. You know, the ANC are prostitutes. They'll take money from wherever. Whoever pays them, they'll bend over.
I was actually referencing the money that we gave Iran during the Biden administration.
I don't know. You guys have got lots of it, so you throw it around a bit too much. But I think Donald's reining it in.
Is China much of an influence in South Africa and the rest of Africa?
So China is a big influence in Africa. It's less of an influence in South Africa, but it is involved. It's very involved in, East Africa in particular. Djibouti, it's got a big military base, but so does America. And then it's very influential in the ports and rail and infrastructure in most of the East African countries. But I think China's got serious problems. It's in deflation now. I don't know if you notice. It's in deflation. Yep. Its military hasn't fought a war since Korea and has the same problem as Russia. The grandchildren of the Korean War, like the grandchildren of the Second World War in Russia, are all the military generals because they're loyalists, but they are not professional soldiers and they don't know what to do. China wouldn't stand a chance in a war against America and its allies, and Taiwan. Wouldn't stand a chance. Everyone goes, oh, China's the biggest military in the world. America would clean them up in 10 seconds. And they know it.
In 1963, while I was taking a poli-sci course at the University of North Carolina, our Russian history professor or poli-science professor said something which I've never forgotten because I think it's still true today. Back then, he said, China has the strongest military in the world at 50 yards.
I love it. I love it. So I think China's going to be on the back foot. They've got serious economic problems, serious social problems, environmental problems. Their neighbors are not that enamored by them because China's taken advantage of them for so long. And with Donald Trump and his administration being strong, I think China's big time on the back foot. And America knows it. This is the American era. This is the beginning of the greatest economic, military, technological, and cultural growth and explosion of America. I think you're at the beginning of the greatest boom ever.
I tend to agree with you. One of the things that we have discussed within our own group for the past, I guess since Donald Trump first came into office the first go-round, was his use of energy to influence both economics and geopolitics, and his releasing or easing the restrictions on coal mining had an incredible impact, both in actuality and in potential, because the U.S., if we had no gas or oil, we'd have enough coal to provide our energy needs for the next 2,000 years. So you add that in as a proxy for oil, and all of a sudden we have significant control over the markets or influence over the markets.
So, listen, what he's done is so intelligent. The whole net zero concept is cultural Marxism, like CRT, like DEI. It's cultural Marxism, and I'm glad Your administration has said no.
So let me ask you this. Do you have any advice or warnings to the United States? What would you say to people of the United States who want to know, okay, what should we expect? What do we have here from from your perspective as an outsider?
Never sit on your laurels. Never take things for granted. Freedom was invented by the British through the Magna Carta and then amplified and by the American Constitution. It is only the Anglosphere, Britain and then America, that created freedom, invented freedom, created freedom, and has allowed the world, or vast majority of the world, to experience what freedom is. You are the flag bearer of freedom. Never let that flag go down, because very easily the people underneath, the cultural Marxists, the lazy people, and the people that take it for granted are the threat inside. The barbarians are inside the gate.
I think that the Constitution of the United States was the most valuable and strongest political document ever written in the history of the world.
I'll give you one more thing.
Sure.
The concept of America and the American dream is the greatest manifestation of freedom the world has ever known. If I went to live in Japan, I would never become Japanese. If I went to live in Germany, I would never become German. But if I went to live in America, on day one, I am an American. And that's the greatest thing ever. So,
if the United States, if America wasn't so good, you wouldn't have so many people trying to get here. I mean,
so I've said to
I don't see
my
massive people trying to get into China, Russia, or North Korea.
and there's a chart, it's a fantastic chart. Where are people escaping from? Where are they going? Well, they're escaping from the Russia, China, totalitarian Islamic countries, theocratic, despotic countries, and they're going to the Judeo-Christian Western countries. Says it all. So my older sons, Alex and Luke, 28 and 25, mum's American, American passports. And I'm saying to them, you've got to be living in America and building your businesses there because it's the country of the past, the present, and the future.
Very interesting. On that note, I would like to say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and God bless you,
God bless you. Thank you.
democracy, and the United States of America.